Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dual Citizens. I'm Stephen McAlpine.
And I'm David Ould.
And looking dapper there, David. Are you going to court or something?
No, I'm not, but I just thought one of us has to make an effort, Steve. And clearly it wasn't going to be you. So here we are. It's got cold this last week, and so I'm just a little tweeting it up slightly. What do you think?
Look, it's okay. I'm living in New Zealand, so don't talk to me about cold. And look, you know that there's a whole style thing where the plainest clothes are the most expensive, and that's a style thing. And this is a very plain jumper, so I'll let you guess the price. But anyway, Dave, what are we looking at today on Dual Citizens?
What are we looking at today? The Prime Minister of Australia may have stuck his foot in it at a rally all about domestic violence. We'll look at that. We'll be thinking about those pro-Palestine students and their protests all over American campuses and that issue. And then enfant terrible, how was that? Russell Brand got baptized. What's going on? Has the world gone mad? Is the apocalypse coming? We've been thinking about that as well, all on Dual Citizens this week.
Okay, Dave, let's crack on to it. Here in Australia, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has been accused of lying by the organiser of a women's rally. That sounds like it could cause some trouble. What's going on?
Oh, well, lying, maybe just mistaken about the facts, who knows. So there was a big women's rally just this last weekend in Canberra. It's all about domestic violence, of which we've seen an increase over the already poor, awful levels, especially of deaths of women in domestic situations. A rally by an organisation called What Were You Wearing? And they were trying to lobby the government on a number of issues around domestic violence. A number of politicians turned up to the rally, and some of them just stood and listened, but the Prime Minister, it is alleged, effectively forced his way onto the platform and then gave a speech where he opened up and said, well, we weren't invited to speak, or we offered to speak. And as he was saying these words, the organizer of the rally next to him actually just said, that's not true, and turned away and cried. So probably one of these moments where maybe Albo didn't quite read the room well, and effectively looked like he was forcing himself onto the stage on a rally all about men forcing themselves onto women. Not a good look, no matter what happens.
No, not a good look. And gendered violence is a political hot topic, and that cranked up the heat on it. And obviously it was an issue with during Scott Morrison's time as Prime Minister as well. So why is it such a hot topic now? Obviously, we're seeing the reports in the paper as well, just terrible issues of gendered violence. What's going on?
Yeah, so, in one sense, the activists and the papers choose what they're going to make a big deal of, but I think two things are pretty clear. One, there has been an uptick in violence, and particularly in the number of women who are dying as a result of gendered violence. So the rates were already pretty awful, but they have increased this year, and so it's probably worth us asking why that is. I'm not sure if there are any easy answers to that question, but it's the bad problem has already got worse. I think the other issue is that it's budget season for the federal government, and so if you want to push the government to be putting extra things into their budget, now is the time to do it. So quite the right time to do it. And we've actually seen even this morning as we record the government announcing that they're going to be spending huge amounts of money on this topic, and I think that's much needed. Yeah.
More money on something. Do you think throwing money at it's going to solve it?
Oh, look. Like, who knows? There is more money will help in many ways. So a number of years ago, I chaired a charity in southwest Sydney where one of the things we did is help women in these situations. And I can tell you there is nowhere near enough funding in the area. So, regularly having to help women escape to refuges and things, and vastly underfunded, as is, by the way, the funding for helping men work out their issues. So it costs about $200,000 a year to incarcerate someone for a year. That same money could pay for an effective caseworker who could run programs for many, many, many men. One of my great frustrations running that charity was that the same amount of money that would lock a guy up could be spent on keeping many, many, many other men out of prison. But it seems to me there's no desire there for that. And I think in one sense, we just don't know how to handle these issues, and it could be that we're a little bit blind to some of the things that we've set up and some of the cultural movements that we've encouraged that end up teaching men that sex actually isn't about marriage and having children and being faithful to one woman and all the things that go with it. And then we're surprised when we're telling men that sex are other things, and we know we've diluted their sense of what their relationships are. No easy answers, but at least we could be cracking on, yeah.
Well, I mean, bringing that up, the group organising the protest that the Prime Minister was sort of called out on, it was called "What Were You Wearing?" And that's a loaded question, right? Is it wrong to talk about things, potential targets of violence, like, is it wrong to use that term?
Let me tread carefully, Steve, but nevertheless tread there. I get a bit frustrated by this because the main danger for women obviously is within their domestic relationships, and yet the "what were you wearing" line is really about women who are the subject of attacks outside of those relationships, sort of, going out at night and so on. And look, so it frustrates me that one thing gets caged in terms of another thing, and that might be something we could talk about. What do we say? Look, if I were to have a conversation, say, with my daughter, and I know you have a daughter as well who's now an adult, it's wrong, isn't it, if they were attacked, to say, "What were you wearing?" Because obviously it's not their fault that they're attacked. At the same time, I can imagine saying to someone, "Well, if you drive your car and you park it somewhere, do you lock the door of the car?" Yes. Why? Because there's people out there who will take advantage or be prompted to act poorly by the opportunities that they perceive that they've been given.
Opportunity would be a woman, not what she's wearing, don't you think?
A woman, right. And so as ridiculous as it is and as awful as it sounds, there are some men who are going to be prompted by what you wear. Now, that's not your fault. They're the ones to blame for that. But let's be sensible. Now, we may be cancelled out for saying that, but I think there it is. In the same way that we all want to be careful in different ways, but more fundamentally, it's how do we handle the fact that there are men out there who will do these things? Like, what do? We've got to look after ourselves as well, don't we? As well as tell them to stop doing it.
Well, I mean, when you say there are men out there, one of the questions is, are all men potential rapists? That's something you hear, and you as a man, you're asking yourself questions all the time about how you engage with people. What do you think of that?
Are all men potential rapists? Well, in one sense, yes. Let me answer that, and that will upset the other half of our listeners. Yes, because I have the equipment, and I'm a sinner. So we're all capable of doing awful things, and Jesus speaks to our hearts, doesn't he? He says, out of men's hearts comes all manner of horrible things, Mark chapter 7. So I don't want to pretend that, I'm pure as the driven snow. In another sense, I want to go, no, clearly not. Clearly not. Clearly there's a particular cohort, grouping of men who, for one reason or another, end up doing these things. Here's what I do want to say, however. There is one man who all women should know that they can trust. So I just love that encounter that Jesus has with the Samaritan woman at the well, right? And and he goes, go tell your husband, and she goes, and he says, actually, I know the truth, and whatever the truth is about her story, and one imagines even more sinned against than she has sinned if she has sinned. But Jesus is presented there as the perfect man that we can trust. So I want to go, men are bad. Women can be bad as well. We're all sinners, but there is one guy that we can trust, and he models for men what to be like. He offers forgiveness. He offers a safe place. Let's use that language. Somehow Jesus has got to be the answer to all this. And if our nation doesn't look to him, they're never going to really sort out this problem.
Exactly. Well, another topic that seems torturous to look at and resolve, the pro-Palestinian students protesting across universities in the United States, and it's gotten particularly hot at Columbia University in New York, which seems to be, universities seem to be the place that this is the hottest. What is going on? What are your initial thoughts on this, Dave?
Oh, Steve, so many. Where to start? Here's my big thing. I really feel sorry for some of these pro-Palestinian student leaders in particular who are now finding themselves expelled, chucked out, even arrested. The universities that they're protesting at have for years, dare I say it, decades, kind of been open up to this kind of the stuff we've seen, that the wokeism, the oppressor and oppressed narrative about everything, the critical theory stuff. That's right. They've been open to it. They've even endorsed it. That clearly is the paradigm through which these protesters are expressing their protest over it. And so they ought to have expected the university hierarchy to stand behind them, because it effectively has done it. But what happened? Well, of course, they folded, didn't they? Like a deck of cards. And all of a sudden, the police have come in. Not just like the University of Texas, where from the start they were like, we're not having this. But even at Columbia, they've kind of just folded, haven't they? And the police have come in, and people have found themselves arrested and expelled and chucked out for these things. I feel sorry for them. It's kind of just all crumbled around them, and do I feel sorry? Maybe not.
Tenure, right? If you're a professor and you get tenure for teaching exactly that, the students must be a bit gape-mouthed at getting arrested for actually implementing in the public square exactly what their lecturers and professors are telling them they should believe and do.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we could take a little bit of encouragement for that this seemingly impregnable fortress isn't so impregnable. But I think more, I just feel sad about the whole thing. What a horrible mess it's all become. But also, you surely have seen the interviews on social media of students where people have gone and said, well, what are you protesting for? And they kind of, there's this one girl who turns to her friend and goes, I don't quite know what it is what Columbia's meant to have done. We kind of just showed up and waved our flags. So, you've got the really principled critical theorists who have got absolutely smashed. You've got the guys just turning up for the protest because they need to be seen to be protesting. It's what all the cool kids are doing. And the police finally just had enough, quite rightly, I think, and got rid of them all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for a meaning and purpose, protests aren't bad things to do, but then you've got to figure out what that is. But is there a Christian response to all of this? As a conservative, I look at this and go, and a good thing too, but perhaps as a Christian, I need to think about what would it look like to have a Christian response to what's going on, because it's been hot on social media between Christians on this issue too.
Yeah, well, that distinction is an important one, I think, between like your political position and perhaps your gospel position. We might return to that a little bit later. Blessed are the peacemakers might actually be a better one to go for here. Some awful stuff was happening in these protests, lots of anti-Semitic stuff, and then in the last couple of nights we actually did see some counter-protests that were also pretty horrible. I think on the West Coast there was at UCLA, there was some pretty nasty stuff going on. Kind of the stuff we talked about when we talked about Bishop Mari Emanuel and his stabbing, like the counter-conservative response to it. Equally, I think, unpleasant, some of it. So blessed are the peacemakers. There's got to be a better way, hasn't there, to sort out our differences than screaming obscenities and hatred at each other and calling for the eradication of a group of people and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's the better way forward, but certainly not the invective and the violence of words that we've seen all around. Yeah,
it's become very hot, but. But what about Israel, the nation? Lots of Christians have opinions about Israel, and there's some theological long fingers in that situation. What's going on with our theological understanding of Israel that could be heightening this, and how do we dial that down, and how do we...
Yeah, I think this confuses the issue. It's one of my hobby horses, so I'm just going to take it for a canter with you, if that's all right, Steve. I think we need to be clear... Is the Israel of today is not the Israel of the Bible. It shares the same name and perhaps the same geography, but little else. As you look at the trajectory of the Bible from Old to New Testament, it seems quite clear to me that the true Israel of God, the one that God is speaking about, even in the Old Testament, and then the apostles, and particularly Paul himself, a Jew, realizes the true Israel of today is the church. Now, I want to be careful when I say that. It's not a replacement theology. It's not that the church replaces Israel in God's purposes. It's that the church today is what God always... It is Israel. How does Paul put it in Romans 11? We've been grafted into the tree that is Israel. Israel was always meant to be ultimately more than just a Jewish nation. It was meant to be a nation where Gentiles were brought in. And you see hints and whispers of that in the Old Testament, and then the fullness of it when Jesus comes and by the work of the Spirit, Gentiles are brought in, which means that ultimately the fulfillment of all those Old Testament promises of Israel is not a piece of land in the Middle East, but the church itself. And so we get messed up when we make it about that strip of land. And I think the dispensationalists there get a little bit messed up with all of that. Here's what I want to say with that, which means, therefore, that your response to what's going on with Israel, and particularly the Gaza thing and elsewhere, is a political decision that you need to make, whichever way you go. I think there's some arguments to defend Israel in general, but I wouldn't be making them as biblical arguments. I think they're political arguments. The true Israel that I'm worried about is the Israel of which I'm a pastor in. It's the Church of God, Galatians 6.
Well, let me ask you a question, though. What about anti-Semitism just seems to cling on over millennia? There's something in that I can't quite put my finger on, right?
Yeah.
I think there's something there, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Anti-Zionism, Semitism really quickly.
Here's how I put it together in my head. I mean, the Apostle Paul, when he's writing Romans, says his heart's desire, Romans 10, is for his brethren, is for the Jews. At that point, he's talking about what we might call ethnic Israel, the Jewish race. God still has a great love for them, and if this world hates God and his anointed King Jesus, then it's going to hate anything that God loves, and God loves the people of Israel. I don't think that's beyond any doubt, and he longs for them more than anything else that they would come under his true King again. So I think that's like, as we sort of lift the spiritual veil, pull the spiritual veil back, I think that's what's going on. God has a still great, whatever you think's going on in Romans 11, and that's a whole other podcast maybe, and this way all Israel will be saved. Whatever you think's going on there, I think that's the underlying thing. They're special in God's purposes, and so a world that hates God is gonna express that one way by hating the Jewish people.
The other thing we bang on all the time on this podcast about freedom of speech, just to finish, are those students just exercising the thing that we say they should have?
And I would just say, if that's all they were doing, more power to them. But they're not, are they? No. They are expressing anti-Semitism. They're calling for the eradication of a people. Ironically, the people complaining about a supposed genocide are the ones who regularly chant "from the river to the sea," which means get rid of all the Jews. So let's just call that for what it is. It's not kind of where I want to end, but we should call that for what it is.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll pick up.
Oh, this one's going to go on and on as well. Yeah. So, over the weekend, Russell Brand got baptized. He got dunked in the waters of the River Thames, came up without any nasty diseases, but by his own language, born again, a new person, transformed. I literally can't believe it, Steve. What's going on?
It's almost as if, like, the person who persecuted the early church sort of turned around and started preaching to. It's crazy. Look, Russell Brand, if you don't know him, comedian, enfant terrible, as we would say. I probably didn't even say it as well as a well-educated Englishman would say the French. But comedian, thinker, bit of an iconoclast, a little bit of a conspiracy theorist in some regards, but someone over the last 20 to 30 years who is big news in England, a comedian who's very funny and very transgressive and has done some terrible things and was hypersexualized, drug addict, and things have come home to roost. But over the past few years has been more and more interested in spirituality, and that has taken more of a Jesus shape in the last few years. I mean, people in the Times and all that were saying he's just becoming a Christian because he's getting done over for his crimes. He's been on this path for a while.
Yeah, and he's not the only one, is it? I mean, I think we've mentioned before on Dual Citizens other celebrities that have sort of taken this path, taken this journey. It feels like more and more of them. What's driving this move?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Look, Kanye's the cautionary tale, right? I noticed that someone said, Brand himself said on his socials the other day, I know some people are skeptical because you're a celebrity. He said, I'm not a celebrity. I'm Russell Brand. I've been Russell Brand since I was a kid. That's who I know who I am. I don't think of myself like that. But there has been this move, and part of it has been a dabbling of the toes in spirituality among a cohort who are going, this non-transcendent secular thing isn't working. And then what you've seen is a coalescing towards more of a Jesus framework for many of them. You think Jordan Peterson, you think A.N. Hersey Ali, you think Russell Brand, and you think, well, from high culture to psychological culture to pop culture, there's something going on that people are asking big questions again, and they're giving permission for other people to do it.
Is it the thing that Tom Holland's, reminded us of, and Glenn Scrivener in his book, and Dawkins has almost begrudgingly acknowledged that they're kind of going, well, the current thing's not working. What did work? What was that thing that worked? Is that maybe what this is?
Yeah, I noticed Sam Harris's a new book called Waking Up, and it's his attempt to be completely secular in his spirituality. And in the end, those two things can't hold together, right? It's like the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse, Dawkins, Dennett, Hitchens, and now Harris. Two of them are dead, and two of them are, I'm a cultural Christian, or here's how to do spirituality without doing Christianity and religion. Going, that didn't fly. So something's missing in our cultural framework, and you're seeing it with millennials going back to religion. You're seeing the meaning and purpose bucket, as Mark Sayre said, drained dry at the same time that the experience bucket has been full. And there's no one who's had more experiences than a Russell Brand.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to Brand. So, given the radical nature of the change that this appears to be, I mean, there are a number of people who are very skeptical about what's going on. You mentioned maybe he's still facing a number of accusations of things in his past, and some people go, well, maybe that's just what's clouding this. How has Brand himself responded to that skepticism?
With joy, interestingly. Now, I get the skepticism at some level. People said he hasn't said enough about Jesus, and he hasn't said. I mean, I'm a credo Baptist, so if you can show me a 1-year-old who said anything about Jesus, we'll go with it. But but what I'm being cheeky now. I think just wait and see. It feels like the man who was blind and Jesus smeared on his eyes, and then he said, "I see men like trees walking." And then there's this case of, let's just wait. When the pendulum has swung so far back for someone like Brand, for it to swing forward is a huge move of the will, and your own will can't move that forward. So let's just wait.
And what are you expecting? Like, I just watched the video of him that he filmed after he was baptized, and I was like, hey, he talks about Jesus in a way that I'm happy with, but he talks about him like Russell Brand would, like he's still Russell Brand, right?
That's what I thought too. It's like, what are you expecting? Yeah. And this is another thing pointing forward, that Tim Keller's book on Forgive, he said the next generation of people who become Christians won't have a framework that, of course, you're supposed to forgive, because that's not in the cultural water. It's cancelled. And so when someone like Russell Brand says they believe, there's a lot of back engineering to do in someone like Russell Brand's life in a way that our churches aren't equipped to even think about, because we're expecting people to come generally fairly tidied up.
Yeah. And maybe, to be fair, we are right to be wary, aren't we? Because, Kanye West, who that was huge when it exploded, and that album is it's a Christian album. I mean, it's quite clearly he's got some solid engagement with the Bible. And yet now his latest thing is he's launching his own porn channel, and he's just gone off the charts on some stuff. So is there maybe a warning there?
If you've seen the Kanye documentary that was on Netflix, it's sobering to see the level of mental health issues that he suffers. Yeah. And just people sitting around, even in that video, watching him, where he was definitely bipolar. And there's that issue. So I'm very cautious about saying too much about that issue. Yeah. But because one of the symptoms is hyper-religiosity. Right? There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Brand seems to have thought about this in a much more comprehensively intellectual and philosophical and existential way.
And I think has a better framework around him. People I'm speaking to in the UK who know his situation a bit better have said to me he's in a small but good church. The church is not keen to leverage it themselves. They're trying to damp it down. And it's the kind of place where you and I will be confident to send people, and they're not making a big fuss of it. And perhaps he might then get the space just to be Russell, not even Russell Brand. Because if this is a genuine conversion, this guy, I mean, we need to pray for him, right? Because part of conversion is repentance, and if Zacchaeus says, here's all the money back and 4 times for the people I've cheated, if Brand has done half the things he's been accused of, he will have some public statements to make, but they won't come in a hurry, will they?
No, that's going to have to unpack, because there's plenty of people out to get him. The great irony being that the BBC lauded every action he did 25 years ago and laughed about it.
Of course.
And it feels like something will really shift in him, but it won't shift in the BBC. It feels like there's something there.
We'll see. Well, at least Brand now knows what forgiveness is,
Yes.
and hopefully others watching along will see. What did the Apostle Paul say? In me, the chief of sinners, that Christ's unlimited patience may be seen.
Indeed. Hey, that's it, I think, Dave. A lot to cover, but it's been good to chat with you. Thanks for sharing this time with us, those of you listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching Dual Citizens. I'm David Ould.
And I'm Stephen McAlpine.
If you like what you've watched, please do subscribe. Maybe even just leave a review or some comments. Make sure other people can hear about it as well.
Because we need more friends.
We need lots more friends.
He needs more friends.